Hello.
Welcome. My name is Kim Marie, and it is an honor and a pleasure to be in front of you today. Thank you all for coming to learn evolutionary astrology. I found it in 1985. My very first reading was with Jeffrey Wolf Green, and it's history from there. And so I did run his school for 8 years, teaching evolutionary astrology, and I can't remember the first time I taught class, so been doing it for a while. Two things I'm going to tell you. I am a slideshow queen, okay? I like my slideshows. And so I'm probably going to have way more information than you can possibly write down.
Okay. And by the way, thank you to those of you who are listening Zoom live in the future. And so there's going to be too much information here to write down. So either do your screenshots. You can contact us, evolutionaryastrology.net, if you want any slides, or better yet, get the recording, pay it forward to NORWAC, and then you'll have all those slides and my voice and the chart for your leisure. Okay. The second thing that I want to tell you is in regards to our volunteer who's going to be spontaneous today. I would also like to thank all of you who are here for the very first time. Thank you. Yeah, and you're going to be one of the lucky ones. And I'm going to try and train myself to look at this camera and be in front of the camera. For the Zoom people, I can wander. Got a lot of Sag in my chart. And so there's going to be a few things if you want to be a chart example, okay? First of all, you have to have a little blue star on your little tag. Okay, somebody who's first here at the conference. All right. You also have to be willing to come up to this spot with me at the beginning, because we're going to do something called environmental conditionings. Evolutionary astrology never assumes something with your chart. It's observe, correlate. And so you have to be willing to just come up here for a minute, and I'm going to ask you some questions. You're going to answer it as everybody is looking at your chart. Okay. So we'll get to that live chart example in just a moment. First of all, when I was making up my slides, I was like, oh, I'll just do a chart for the moment of this lecture. And so this is what you're looking at on your screen. By now, some of you maybe have figured out that we have a Mars-Pluto opposition this weekend, and it is square the nodes with the South Node in Scorpio. By the way, that South Node in Scorpio is on my Sun, Mercury, Neptune. So yeah, I have a lot of Scorpio too. And so what we are looking at just in this chart, as you're going to discover, is Pluto is the unconscious desire nature of the soul. Pluto is the soul. And those desires are made conscious via Mars, how we instinctively become. And so here is Mars sitting on the very spot that Pluto today is intending all of us to evolve into. These two are a special planetary pair. You would have, Maurice talked about it, I think, yesterday. And so here they are opposite each other in the skies, and they're square the nodes of the moon. I got a slide on planets square the nodes of the moon for you, as well as we'll look some more in just a little minute. But to me, this was like, oh, how opportune for evolutionary astrology to try and bring you clarity out of confusion in regards to how to look at a chart. So with that, okay, did you get your little screenshot? What is the soul? Most of us here probably already know that answer to the question. If you're a student of astrology, you are already wondering, why am I here? What are my lessons? The two famous questions that Jeffrey Green was known for teaching. And so it's that immutable part of ourselves that is always here, that always exists, yesterday, today, tomorrow, whether we are in form or not. And so the soul, from the perspective of EA, is a dual desire nature. We have a desire to separate from that which created us. That's why we're all sitting here in this room. We exist. I'm here. You know, I have a job. Maybe I have a lover. I have these things that I want in my life. The separating desires are everything and anything. And we go through countless lifetimes, achieving a desire, momentary satisfaction, what next? Repeat. And eventually, why am I here becomes more and more conscious for us. And that starts to represent that desire to return to that which created us, or source energy. And so we start to become more and more and more and more conscious to everything that Stephen Forrest spoke about last night. There's more than just this existence. I want to, know it more in here. Another, pair of shoes. I had to go get higher shoes so you could all see me today. Another pair of shoes isn't going to do it anymore. And so that then leads to a soul expanding in consciousness, as we call it. All right. And so just if you can't see this on your screen, the last separating desire we exhaust is the sexual desire. All right. It is down to, very simply, procreation of the species. And what we observe correlate in natural law is typically only about 1% to 2% of souls alive on the planet are in fact exhausting the sexual desire. It is one of the most natural desires we all have. And its many varied forms as Pluto and Capricorn has exploded out of the closet for us, thank goodness. And so as that then becomes the last exhausting desire, the only one left is to really know source and be with source. Now, from Jeffrey Green's method of evolutionary astrology, we recognize that not all souls are born at the same level of awareness. We call it those evolutionary states of consciousness within the soul. And I like to use this diagram because it shows you that it is not a better than, less than. It is expanding circles of awareness. Consensus, the cowbells around their neck, about 7 out of 10 people, any race, any continent, any area, any right now in any existence in time. And these are the people who consent. If somebody says, religion says astrology is the work of the devil, they take it wholeheartedly. When we expand out to individuated consciousness, which is about 2 out of 10 people, I'm going to think for myself, thank you very much. This is where we try to break free from consensus. And EA divides these up in each of these 3 states of consciousness into first, second, and third. And so we delineate even more into the states of awareness, but that'd be the only subject right now, if that's what we were going to talk about. So this is just a brief overview for you. And then approximately 1 out of 10 are what we call spirituated. They understand timeless, universal concepts, the mystical side of any belief system. And that is what we are all doing as we release these exhausting desires. We expand in consciousness. You had a question?
You just answered it. I was just wondering what the text under the.
Oh, it's spirituated. It is spirituated. Consensus, individuated, and spirituated states of consciousness. And so karma dharma. Everybody familiar with that concept? Probably most of us are. I'll try not to touch this. Karma is basically understanding that consequences and actions or choices have consequences, actions have reactions, and that can exist beyond one lifetime. All right. And so from the perspective of evolutionary astrology, we have a theory that maybe about 10 to 20% of any given life would appear to be fated. And what that means is you made choices in a past life that set up something. It's set up running into a specific lover or a specific karmic work situation. And it can be as varied as any example our head can come up with. All right. Dharma is that understanding that we all have a free choice. We all have free will. We are not, continually prisoner to fate. We can make different choices in our life. And as we are moving into our Dharma, as our soul is evolving, we can set up fated events in a future life. And here's a biggie. I've heard various teachers talk about karma just being negative. No, karma can go from 100% negative to 100% positive. Again, it's your own free will and your own free choices as a soul. We all have been, hearing this weekend, we don't come in with a random chart. That chart is exactly where we need to be at this moment in time to learn what is next, what is highest and best for our soul right now. Astrological timing. In a nutshell, there's two kinds of evolution, involution, non-cataclysmic. Okay, this is our day-to-day life. We're going along, we learn how to walk, we learn how to ride that bicycle, we get a job, we decide we're going to, improve our diet and eat better, whatever you want to do in your, normal daily life. This is how most of us evolve. But periodically, within non-cataclysmic evolution, we have those famous cataclysms in our life, the job loss, the divorce. I have a brother-in-law who is entering hospice today. It's pretty cataclysmic right now for my family. And so those are those major events that really cause a why in the road. And what can happen with these cataclysmic events is because all souls desire to be secure. It's so much easier to resort back to the past than to find that free will and free choice to move forward into that unknown and do something wildly different than you have been doing in your day-to-day life. That's the point of those cataclysmic choices. Now, both of these types of evolution are going to exhibit when the evolving forces in the universe overcome resisting forces, right? The evolving forces in the universe overcome the resisting forces. And as I said, it takes courage and willpower to make those choices to evolve. And if you want to think about this for a minute, what is one of the most natural laws that came into existence with the Big Bang? Evolution, evolving, changing. Now, sooner or later, this star called the sun is going to explode. I think it's about, we got a few billion years to go yet, and it's going to involve on itself. And then it's going to burst forth in another galaxy and another, blah, blah, and start all over again. So I don't know of any situation for any form of species or consciousness that isn't always in a state of evolution. EA likes to say the reason the Big Bang happened 14 billion years ago was the unmanifest manifested in order to evolve, in order to perfect itself. So we're all part of this grand co-creative process in doing that together. Now, there's lots of tangents I could go into with these PowerPoint slides, but I'm tasked with 75 minutes, okay? Briefly, Pluto, if you haven't discovered this yet, has a very elliptical orbit. You can see it's the one that's different than most of the rest of the planets going along. Well, that orbit makes it go from anywhere from 10 to 30 years in a sign of the zodiac. Isn't it interesting that its shortest transit is Scorpio, the sign that it rules, and its longest transit is the opposite, Taurus, to really help us move towards that Taurian self-reliance. As you can also see on your screen here, we're going to go next into what we call the karmic dynamic and the evolutionary intent. These are specific to Pluto. They exist not only on an individual level, they also exist on a collective level, meaning that there can be groups of souls that choose to come in and incarnate together for various reasons. There is the thought that, there were volunteers for the gas chambers over in Germany. That was my last lifetime, by the way, with 3 kids. So, and point is, There are time periods when groups of souls will choose to collectively come in together. It can be from a trauma, okay? But it can also be because they are choosing collectively to evolve and hopefully create that cataclysmic leap forward for humanity. So here's some specifics for you. This is now specific to Pluto. As we said, in EA, Pluto represents the soul. We don't care what astronomers call it. And so you all have a natal Pluto in your chart by sign, by house, by aspects. We call it the karmic dynamic. It's the area to which we all gravitate naturally and unconsciously for security reasons in any given life. So you were all born with Pluto in a sign. That's the generation you were born into. Most famous example, the baby boomers are almost all Pluto Leos, all right? Pluto's moving so fast right now that, you know, Gen Z is probably what we would call Pluto Scorpio, Pluto Sag, okay? And so then we all have natal Pluto in an individual house. That is where our own soul is specifically coming from by most recent past lives. And so that will be where we naturally gravitate to. And again, we have 12 examples, but we're only going to look at one today. Because the soul operates on such an unconscious level, all souls incarnate with an ego, that more conscious part of ourself that we know. Now, in broad terms, that ego is every other archetype in the chart, every other archetype in the chart. In EA, we will specifically look at the nodal axis of the moon as representative to kind of like the funnel for the ego on an emotional level, on a more conscious level. And so the natal south node, by its own sign house aspects, will represent how the ego operated in past lives, especially on an emotional level. How it would take that natal Pluto and make it more conscious. And so natal Pluto and that natal south node is where together we all gravitate for those security reasons. You can expand it further even into where is your natal south node by its planetary rulers. Where's the natal south node ruler by sign? Where's the natal south node ruler by house? You can go into the aspects. It's going to add in a little more detail to where the soul is coming from for security. All right. Now, as I said before, every other planet in some manner or fashion is going to be part of that ego that we all have within our souls. And so every other planet in the chart can be related to Pluto. One of the areas that I found early on, many, many moons ago in astrology, that I absolutely loved was the cycle of phases and aspects. Okay, and you can probably go to our website and find it there. And if not, just contact me. I'm happy to send it out. You can just probably Google it on the internet now. But evolutionary astrology has never looked at a square being just one representation. There are 4 squares. There's a crescent square, first quarter square, disseminating square, last quarter square. Okay, we look at aspects from 0 to 360, and the slower moving planet becomes stationary. You compare the faster moving planet to it. Okay, got an exception here for you in a couple of slides. All right, get an idea of what this karmic dynamic is, where our souls are coming from by way of natal Pluto, south node, all the rulers, etc. So the opposite of all of those is where the soul is intending to grow in any given lifetime. Now, I will tell you, there are variations to this. There are variations. I'm going to go over the variations. Question.
I'm just wondering if you could be a little louder because there's just a lot of sound going on in the room. Hard to-
I am known for having a very loud voice when I need to. Just ask my cats. Thank you for speaking up. Zoom, turn your mics down. I will definitely speak louder. Okay, does this work for everybody? Okay. And so now we're going to look at where any soul in general is intending to evolve in any given life. We call this the evolutionary intent or our future. And in general, it is the opposite point of Pluto. We call it the PPP, the Pluto polarity point. And we look at that by sign, house, and aspects as well. That polarity point will be where any generation of souls is evolving to grow. Example, the Pluto and Leo generation has a very subjective, me-focused security mechanism. They are here to learn the Aquarian polarity of objectivity. They are not the center of the universe. They are a part of the universe. And so every generational polarity works that way around the 12 signs of the zodiac, works that way around the 12 houses of the zodiac. And so question.
Did I just understand you to say that you take the polarity point of Pluto and you're going to look at the aspects to that point, even though there's
Yes.
nothing there?
Yes, when you go for certification with us, you have an assignment that looks at nothing but the evolutionary intent. It's a two-part assignment. One part, you look at the slide we just talked about. The second assignment, you have to then flip it and look at where the soul's going. Yes.
Okay.
So everybody heard that question correctly, that we look at that Pluto polarity point, and we're going to look at that in relationship to the North Node. Many of us probably know that the North Node is that ego that we're striving to create in any given lifetime. And we'll look at where that is by sign, by house, by aspects. You've heard South Node is your Achilles heel. It's also your gifts. Your North Node is the new that you are striving to create in your world on a very conscious level. And it is also a mechanism by which your soul's intent, that Pluto polarity point, can have a more conscious way to access how it is going forward as well. And then, as you see on your screen, one more, we can look at the planetary rulers by sign and house and their aspects as additional material that the ego is striving to create to evolve its own soul forward. Make sense? Questions?
When you're looking at the sign ruler and all this stuff for the Pluto and Scorpio people, are you then looking at the traditional ruler of Scorpio to get that understanding?
I'm steep in the Jeffrey Wolf Green method of evolutionary astrology. The question was, do we look at any of the traditional rulers? You can, because you have the free choice to do so.
Well, I'm talking specifically about when we're, to follow this rubric almost, when we need to look at the planetary ruler of Scorpio, because Pluto is in Scorpio.
Yes.
Then how do we do that?
Yes, yes, yes. I'll give a brief answer, okay? And then we'll see if it shows up in our chart example with our volunteer, okay? So the question is, for example, if we have Pluto in Scorpio and we're going to look at that sign or that ruler of Scorpio, okay? It's Pluto, it's the soul itself. The Pluto and Scorpio generation are a very deep generation of souls. They come in here for the bottom line of everything. I like to say the Pluto and Scorpio generation with, their own ruler, one of them being Pluto, they're the recyclers of the zodiac. They're going to be here to save us or destroy us. And it's going to depend on how well they go to that polarity point, Taurus, and its ruler, Venus, in developing their own self-reliance. Because when Scorpio and Pluto are codependent, they can be pretty destructive. And the more they reach over to that Taurian polarity of self-reliance, the less they internalize their well-being and the less they have to control it out here and manipulate everything. Am I answering how you're asking the question? Okay. All right. There was another question. Yes.
So if Pluto is square your nodes.
Yes.
Is that especially significant since the point opposite would also be square?
Yes. Yes, it is. The question is, we're looking at this the example we had with what's in the sky this weekend. Pluto was square the nodes in addition to Mars being square the nodes. And what does that represent basically?
I mean, in the natal chart.
Oh, in the natal chart, we're going to look at that next.
Okay.
We're going to look at that next. We're going to look at it and you can extrapolate when a planet is square the nodes as we look at the next few charts, okay? You can extrapolate that on a natal perspective and you can extrapolate it on a forecasting perspective. It will have the same interpretation. Another question.
I'm just curious how you're using planetary rulers. Are you using them to represent the house itself, or are you using them just as a way to understand the sign better archetypally?
Okay, I will give you, the question is how do you work with those planetary rulers of Pluto? How do you work with those planetary rulers of the nodal axis? Correct?
Just in your school, how you're doing it right now, how are you using the planet? I'm assuming you're talking about the ruler of the sign, right? Like
We work with the ruler of the sign and the ruler of the house.
Okay.
Here's a real, here's an area of astrology in general that I would invite all of you to consider at all times. I'll give you myself as an example. It's easy to use. I have Sun in Scorpio, but I also have Sun in the 9th house. So I am half a Scorpio Sun and I am half a Sagittarius Sun. Do not neglect the house when you're working with planetary rulers. Any archetype is going to be in a sign and a house. And if you want to consider both almost equally. All right. And so, and when I'm teaching astrology, I specifically, hammer this, so to speak, so that we don't neglect those planetary rulers by sign and house. Am I answering your question?
Yeah,
or more?
And I guess so just to fully understand it, the planetary ruler then for your sun would be Pluto and Jupiter. And then would you apply that to your sun just by talking about
Yes.
the way that Pluto is as a planet
Yes.
and the way that Jupiter is as a planet?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Just looking at my own example with Sun in Scorpio, the ruler's Pluto. Looking at my example of Sun in the 9th house, the ruler's Jupiter. Both of those planets with their aspects would be in consideration for the whole archetype of my sun, my personality, my life force, my creativity. Another question.
So how about if you change the house system, then your node is in a different house?
Okay, what about different house systems and how they change planets in houses? That's going to be a personal preference. Because I came up through Jeffrey Wolf Green for decades, he used the Porphyry house system. And so the 3 main house systems, Porphyry, Placidus, Koch, they all divide the vertical and horizontal axes the same. And where they differ is in each quadrant. Porphyry is simple to understand. However many degrees is in each quadrant, you divide it by 3. No complicated tables like Koch and Placidus. It's a personal preference. As an evolutionary astrologer, I read the chart according to the house system that the client prefers. If they have no preference, I use mine, Porphyry. Yes.
So I actually went to, I was here last year and I listened to an evolutionary astrologer who insisted that Porphyry was the only house, which shocked me because I had never heard that before.
Sounds a little rigid to say my house system is better than your house system. I'll say leave it at that. Okay. All right. I'm going to keep us moving because I want to have time for this chart example. And so the rest of, there's only a few more slides and then we're going to go right into it. When Pluto is conjunct the south node of the moon in the natal chart, there are 3 possibilities and you can extrapolate, cross out Pluto, put any planet in here. Okay. But we're just working with Pluto right now. 3 possibilities. 2 of them are rare, or 2 of them are rare, 1 is common. The first condition, or for the first possibility of Pluto conjunct the south node, is it's a relive situation. There something wasn't learned or successfully resolved in a past life, and you've got to come in and do it again. All right. Think of the I'm not going to use planetary examples, but just think of something in your life that you always feel that you're having to do again. Just in general, that can represent what I'm talking about here. Okay, but this will be specific to Pluto. This would be specific to any planet in your chart if you have a planet conjunct the south node. It is a rare situation. The other one is fruition. In other words, you spent so much prior effort in a past life on whatever Pluto's south node represents by sign, house, and aspects. It just magically happens. You know, you have that golden touch, so to speak. Let me give you an example of that one. Jeffrey Wolf Green had Pluto, or excuse me, he had Sun conjunct the south node in Sagittarius, and he received this paradigm in dreams, and then taught it, Sag. The most common one when Pluto's conjunct the north node or south node is a mixture of both. You got a little bit of karmic redo, you got a little bit of karmic fruition going on, and you've got, you know, the easy areas, the hard areas of your life that you work your way through. All right. Typically, it can take up to the second Saturn return to really be able to go over to that opposite point of Pluto, the Pluto polarity point, the evolutionary intent. This is Jeffrey Green's original teachings. I kind of vary a little bit as I've been working with evolutionary astrology. You know, I still want to give the soul the free choice and the free will, and you just put your mind to it and you can go over to that evolutionary intent, even if you're having to redo. Okay. And then, of course, if there are planets conjunct the Pluto polarity point, like Mars is to Pluto right now, or other planets on the north node, Pluto point, north node are together, okay, that can mitigate moving towards that evolutionary intent or evolving faster. Clear? Okay. Pluto conjunct the north node has one possibility, okay, one karmic evolutionary condition. It means that the soul has been working on that area where natal Pluto is by sign house so intently, it wants to keep working in that area. And the north node, the ego it's striving to create, says, I'm going to come in and help. Okay. Then the Pluto polarity point does not come into the picture. All right. The evolutionary intent remains in the natal Pluto house. And by the way, evolutionary astrology has a tendency to use wide orbs. I will use up to 10 degrees on either side. It'll tell me whether it's coming or going. All right. Mitigating factors. Oh, what if you got planets conjunct the south node? Well, then there's a few hiccups. You've got those three possibilities we just talked about. You know, relive, fruition, or a mixture of both that come in and mix in and stir the pot. Okay, that become part of that picture that's called your soul. And by the way, no right, no wrong in evolutionary astrology. Well, big picture right and wrong. But I like to say, judge less, discern more. Life is choices and experience. We make a choice to have an experience, to make a better choice, to have a better experience, et cetera, et cetera. That's so much easier than the sadomasochistic blah, blah. Okay. All right. So here's the interesting one from the question before. What if Pluto is square the nodal axis as it is right now in the skies today? Again, you can take the same extrapolation both natally and with forecasting. All right. But when it's Pluto, it means the soul itself has skipped steps. In evolutionary astrology, it means that the soul is equally torn between issues relating to the past, south node, issues relating to the future, north node. And it means that the north node has been involved in that past life karma as much as the south node. Okay. And it becomes like a teeter-totter. And it's just back and forth between those two nodes. And what it means for Pluto square the nodes, or for any planet square the nodes, that planet has an arrested development. Jeffrey Green would call it skip steps. Well, you can call it, it's just stuck. It's kind of arrested. It's bouncing back and forth egoically and emotionally, but that planet itself is not evolving necessarily. So in EA, we go, well, how does it get unstuck? We have to go to what we call the resolution node. It's the last node crossed over Pluto. This seems to be one of the areas that, you know, we confuse ourselves. So I'm going to give it to you visually. Before that, though, I want you to just know, maybe you do, the nodal axis moves retrograde 90% of the time. If you look at just the nodal axis of the moon from that perspective, our own emotional nature is always trying to throw off the emotional past and evolve forward emotionally. Oh, that's nice. Thank you. And so what we do, and here's your example. Okay. Oh, good. The words are not hiding anything. Okay. In EA, we will start with the planet. Well, we're using Pluto as the example here, and Pluto's sitting there in the 5th house at 16 degrees Virgo. Because the nodes go clockwise, they reverse through the signs in the houses, you follow the red arrow, and the nodes are at 22 Gemini. And if you can see the colors on your screen, I've got the 22, the actual nodes in purple. The nodes are applying squares to Pluto. But if you look at that node that we're going to look at, applying exact separating actually, what node is that? It's the north node. The resolution node for Pluto square the nodes, out of the skip steps, is the north node. All right. So use your imagination right now from the very first screen. Okay. We had Pluto in Aquarius. And if we go clockwise through the nodes, right now today, the south node's in Scorpio. That's the resolution node for what we have going on in our world right now. We've got to go to that deep psychological knowledge to find how our soul can then evolve forward. Question.
So with Pluto squaring the nodes, it's basically going to be square the nodes for about 9 months, since a couple months earlier. Right?
Yes.
So, I mean, would you treat a Pluto squaring the nodes in the same way that you treat Moon square the nodes, or something that moves much faster? Because basically every baby born in a 9-month period is going to have Pluto square the nodes this year.
Yes. The question is basically, what's the difference between a slower moving planet square the nodes and a faster moving planet square the nodes? All right. You know, when we have those slower moving planets square the nodes, there are deep opportunities on an individual and a collective level to move past karma in our lives, individually and collectively. And it's specific to the planet. Pluto's going to be karma. Well, let's just use Uranus square the nodes as an example. Anybody remember Uranus? Oh, it wasn't Uranus. What was it last year? Jupiter? Was it Jupiter that was square the nodes? You know, we have those slower moving planets that can sometimes go through a retrograde cycle. Then they're traveling backwards with the nodes. So they're in that square for longer periods of time. It can increase the karma, but it also can give us opportunities to really evolve the Dharma forward, especially if we recognize what node the planet's applying to. If the planet's applying to the south node, you got to go dig up something from the past and resolve it, heal it, work with it. If that resolution node is the north node, then you've got to move forward, move forward, move forward. Let's look at the example in the sky right now. Pluto square the nodes, the resolution node, Pluto in Aquarius, okay? I've been waiting for Pluto in Aquarius. That's tomorrow's lecture. The resolution node is the south node. Pluto's saying, dig deep. You've got to look at your past. You've got to really look at what your soul is trying to break free from, Pluto in Aquarius. Okay, where you're trying to detach, objectify, individuate. Mars is opposite Pluto right now in Leo, but it's square, its resolution node is the north node. Mars in Leo, the shorter planetary cycles, okay, they don't last as long. There's an opportunity, but if you blink your eyes, you're going to miss it. So Mars applying to that north node, it's really asking us to, you know, find ourselves, Leo, act upon who we are perceiving ourselves to be, and then work it out through ever evolving self-reliance north node in Taurus. Answer question? Yes, makes sense? And so because the nodes go backwards, just to finish this up, they can be applying squares to a planet, which means it's more intensity. We haven't worked it out yet. They can be exact squares, which is my blue line, and the number 16. If you come in with a planet exactly square the nodes by degree, that planet is, it's like a gestation. That planet is so stuck and it wants to give birth. And it's going to do it through that resolution north or south node. And then if you see the green 12 degrees, if that planet square the nodes is separating squares, you've been dealing with it in the most recent past life. You're starting to get it. You're starting to become unstuck and move forward, evolve. Make sense? Make sense with all that? Okay, so here's the last slide. Environmental conditionings. You know, we all know a chart won't tell us gender. A chart won't tell us the evolutionary state of consciousness. They just observe, correlate, observe, correlate. But we also in evolutionary astrology do not make any assumptions. I was sitting with Maurice last night and at our dinner, and no offense, again, no judgment. But we were talking about how sometimes when people who are very psychic come to astrology, and a psychic comes to get a session from an astrologer, not going to tell you anything. You tell me. We don't work that way. You know, when I've gotten to the point where I go, I don't have anything to tell you. And so, again, especially when you start with evolutionary astrology, be gentle with yourself. Do not think you have to know the evolutionary state of consciousness. We'll look at that at the tail end of our example, okay? But what was their parental environment? You know, were they raised by two parents? Were they raised in a belief system? Have they broken free from it? What do they believe today? What's their educational and career background? What's their relationship history? And by the way, today in relationship history, I feel like I need put another bullet point in here. What's their sexual orientation? Don't make any assumptions, you know? And so we ask, because, and I tell the client, this allows me to orientate to your chart as best as I possibly can and get my own filter and projections out of the way as best as I can. You can't do it 100%. You know, I came through a soul and an eagle, but we try to minimize that and meet the client where they are at. And that's also where those evolutionary states come in. You know, you talk above them, they're confused, they don't understand. You talk below them, they're bored. And again, I'm not saying those words judgmentally. Make sense? Environmental conditionings in regards to that? Okay. All right, so that is the end of my slides. And now I'm going to try this. I did it, yay, yay. I have a techno husband, so I don't have to do any of this stuff. And so now comes the fun part. Again, for those of you who have a little blue star, this is your first time at NORWAC, we are happy to have you here. And so those of you who have blue stars, I'm just, the thing that I would appreciate, we don't have a lot of time to do chart rectification. So I would appreciate someone, you know, the volunteers who raise your hand, I appreciate you to know the time of your birth, okay? And then you gotta be brave enough to come up here and stand by me. Is that okay? All right, first time here, time of birth, willing to come up and stand by me. Elias, you're going to stand up and pick somebody. I'm not doing it.
Whoa,
Yeah, pressure, pressure. Look at those hands, baby. Who should we pick?
Right here.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that was easy. Well, were you shy?
Is that up there?
I just happen to be sitting here, so.
All right. I got to take my glasses off to do this. Okay. Would you tell us your name, dear? You can stand right here.
Lisa.
And there's our Zoom camera. Okay. And so, oh boy, Elias, are you good with mouses? Okay, let me see. Why don't you draw the chart up for me? Okay. Because, yeah, give him your birth data.
Yeah, it's 11:43 p.m.
Well, get the date first.
12/1994.
What's your name?
Lisa.
Lisa.
So,
Sorry.
so December 19th, 1994.
1994,
and 11:43 p.m.
43 p.m.
And then
Sorry,
born in Mount Vernon, Washington.
Washington.
While they're doing that, I have a joke. I always knew my birth moment. My mom had 3 kids. 12:43 p.m., 12:43 p.m., 12:45 p.m. How'd she do that?
Wow.
12:43, 12:43, and 12:45 p.m.
That would be me.
I use True Notes. Thank you. Good question. The question was for our Zoom people. Does EA use mean or True Notes? We use the True Notes. Another question.
What if your nodes are direct?
Oh, like me. Because the mean motion, what if the nodes are direct? Because the mean motion of the nodes, everybody hear me okay? Because the mean motions of the nodes are direct, that 90% of the time or 90% of the people, there is a tendency to be able to move forward and find that destiny in life a little faster. If you were part of the 10% born with your nodes direct, like I was, you're later in life before you really succeed. And again, take that broadly, all right? Don't narrow that definition down. I had a lot of things. I was a very, very good bookkeeper, you know, but I didn't really work with astrology or come out with astrology, shall I say, come out with astrology until I was in my early 40s. You know, I just did it personally for self-growth. One more question, and then we're going to go to this girl.
If the node is direct, then your resolution node is going to change?
No.
Okay.
Mm-mm. No. Both nodes are either going to be retrograde at the same time, or both nodes are either going to be direct at the same time. Okay. Planetary nodes, a different subject. We're just talking the nodes of the moon. All right. So I haven't looked at this chart yet, and I want to move that little. Okay, we can see here, she's a third house Pluto at 29 degrees. I'm trying to see behind those.
Jupiter is next to it.
Can I?
Maybe from the right here, possibly.
Okay,
Clicking it.
do the techno stuff. Thank you.
Yeah, my Jupiter is right next to it.
Oh, Jupiter.
Get the LOL.
Oh. Isn't he wonderful? All right. Okay, there we go. Okay, so while I'm looking at your chart, Lisa, I want you to
Yes.
come up closer to the mic.
Yes.
And I want you to just give us were you raised by 2 parents? Are they alive, still together, siblings? Bullet points.
Raised by 2 parents. They got divorced when I was a teenager. I have 2 siblings. What was
Birth
it?
order.
I'm the oldest of 3 kids.
Brothers, sisters?
I have a brother and a sister, and I have a lot of cousins that feel like siblings.
Okay. All right.
Not a
Oh,
lot, but
oh.
a few of them.
Okay, and so while you're looking at the chart, this is not showing the south node. Can you all extrapolate that south node is actually 12 degrees Taurus in the 8th house? Okay, all right, so you can write that in there. What's your educational and career background, Lisa?
I actually stopped school when I was a teenager and went back to school later in my early 20s. And currently I am teaching classes and do coaching, bringing astrology into it
All
in a
right.
healing capacity.
Are you a budding astrologer?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Anything else to know about education or career?
Just still in school constantly. So that's the only thing I would add.
3rd house Pluto. Okay, what's your relationship history, including sexual orientation, married, divorced, kids, blah, blah?
Straight. I had a child when I was a teenager, not with his dad. I got remarried a few years ago and have a stepdaughter and a child with him now.
And how old are these children?
My oldest is 11. I have a stepdaughter who's 8, and my youngest is going to be 3 in August.
Okay, 11, 8, and 3. Okay, all right. Are there any other significant things or anything else you feel inclined to share?
Maybe with the Pluto, I just recently lost my cousin who was close to me like a sibling in fall.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. All right, thank you, thank you. So at this point, I'm going to do a lot of rattling off, so I will let you sit, but I
Okay.
may ask you some questions, okay,
Yeah.
as we're going along. Were you all able to hear her okay? All right. And so let's just look at the fact that she is the Pluto and Scorpio generation. And let's look at that north node. Can you see that it is pretty widely separated from Pluto? So we do not have Pluto conjunct the north node here. Okay, we do not have that variation to our formula. She's a Pluto and Scorpio generation. We picked one. I love this generation. I have many dear friends. I call you the young bloods. I like this generation because I do think they are going to save us in many ways. But look at where her Pluto is by degree. It's 29 degrees. I'm sure you've probably heard of the anaretic degree. When you are looking at Pluto by sign, because it takes so long, when I have Pluto at 2 degrees Virgo. Okay. And so I'm new to the Pluto Virgo generation. I have other things that bring in the Virgo, but I'm new to that because it's so early in the 30 degrees of a sign. Okay. So when Pluto's closer to the beginning of a sign, that soul is just starting to learn those lessons. It's been doing it in most recent past lives, and it's still a little fresh. When Pluto starts to get to those last 5 degrees of any sign of the zodiac, it's been here with that archetype before. And when it gets to the last degree or 2, it's trying to resolve all of the lessons of that sign. So let's look at the classics with Pluto Scorpio. And here's a question we will ask for her, and it may be mitigated depending on answers. The Pluto Scorpio generation. Here's something else from evolutionary astrology's perspective. I'm looking at, I get to go to 11:45, right? Okay. Here's something else. In evolutionary astrology, any archetype can be distorted or naturally expressed. Any archetype can be distorted or naturally expressed. Okay. What are the distortions of the Pluto Scorpio? Codependency, obsessive compulsive, those little happy words you read in the astrology books. Okay. What that means, and again, Pluto the soul is right in there with that because it's the ruler by sign. So let's just bring that in right now as well. Okay. The Scorpio, Jeffrey would always call Scorpio, Libra's the dating house, Scorpio's the marriage house. And we merge to become more than we were before with that energy. Can you see how that's that soul evolving, that Scorpio archetype? Okay. EA also looks at a planet, sign, and house as one archetype. Learn the 12 archetypes, and then you can take it out to a planet, a sign, or a house, however you want. Okay. That marriage thing is merging. It's so Scorpio always wants to merge. That's why I like some of these younger generations. You know, the Pluto Libras, the Pluto Scorpios can be distorted, but they get us. They're like, what are you guys talking about? You know, me versus you, and go into that political realm and you know, that butting heads we do. They get that merging. All right. So we know that this soul is going to be here to deeply merge, but she's also going to be resolving any areas in regards to intimacy, Scorpio marriage house, in which she may be still codependent, in which she still may, you know, be too wanting to be in the group rather than that Taurian polarity by herself. But take that word marriage and say she wants to merge. She could be merging with her job and become codependent on a job. She could be merging with anything. All right. I'm trying to give you that broad archetype. We can talk for the rest of the day on natal Pluto if you would like. But I'm just trying to key point some bullet things for you. Okay. All right. A question for Lisa. Did you have love interest early on that were intense?
Yes.
Affirmative. Okay. I call it running, you know, the tail end of Scorpio, running into those karma mates so you can do a karma clearing.
Actually, all of my relationships started super intense.
All relationships started super intense. Okay. Yep. Yep. Bless that third house. Well, let's add on that. Let's add on third house, and we're going to add on Jupiter, and you can see there's a T square there going on with Mars and Saturn. Okay, with that. So you probably know enough about Scorpio. You can get that generation she was born into and the polarity of that, the Taurian self-reliance that is so important to go to. Now, here's the thing. That Pluto polarity point is 29 degrees Taurus. It's not in the chart, okay? We need to create a symbol for that. But think about that. Her soul has had previous lives of trying to evolve towards self-reliance. And so that 29 Taurus evolutionary intent is so close, she can taste it. She can taste that self-reliance sometimes and wants to really move into it. Agree? She agrees. So just touching into that. But let's go back and work with the soul. Pluto in the third house, we call that a Gemini soul. Third house is Gemini, Gemini soul, okay? You know, they are the floater. I married a third house Pluto, and I dearly love them because they get me out of my stuckness, my intensity sometimes. So you've got to do that for yourself. You've got all that intensity of the Scorpio generation you were born into, but you're a Gemini soul. So you can move past a lot of that Scorpio energy pretty easy. You can kind of lift yourself out of it if you get into a Scorpio funk sometimes. Gemini souls, third house Plutos on an individual levels, they're coming from past lives where they were the explorers of the zodiac and the explorers of the universe. And well, what about this? Well, what about that? Well, what about this? Well, what about that? Did you hear her words say that she's still studying and she's still a student? You know, and wants to learn and wants to learn and wants to learn. Oh, let's add on Jupiter, new phase to Pluto, a new phase conjunction, and Jupiter's in its own sign of Sagittarius. All right. So we have a much more open-minded Scorpio soul generationally than is typical. Follow? All right. This is an exploring soul. She's trying to shed all that Scorpio intensity and really open up and go, well, who am I evolving into? What's next? She's trying to, again, let that past go behind. Jupiter, Pluto aspects, Jupiter expands everything it touches, positive, negative, to use those words. It just expands it, you know, it's not one Lay's potato chip, it's the whole bag, all right? And so Jupiter conjunct Pluto, a new phase conjunction to Pluto. The soul, it feels everything intensely. Pluto's intense. Jupiter expands, okay? And so while she's got that third house curiosity to her soul, she goes deep and she really is into it. You know, she doesn't, you know, what we've got going on here with Jupiter and Sag in the third house, you know, we've got a polarity there. Follow? We've got a back and forth energy, a back and forth energy. So what can happen with this Gemini soul? Sometimes she has to be careful about scattering herself. You know, would you agree? I want to do this, I want to do that. You know, oh, let's bring in the fact that Saturn is first quarter square. Okay, Pluto. Okay, it's phasal, but it's first quarter square. Follow? Past 90 degrees. That's the temperament. Saturn starts to come in and she can get the overwhelm of Pisces when she's trying to do too much. She has to then work with stepping it down into that sixth house with Saturn and go, okay, I only have 24 hours in a day. What can I get done today? How do I prioritize it, Saturn? How do I really set my goals for the day? And it also then will be that Saturn new phase to Pluto. We have a soul who's really trying to take charge of their own life. Now, in evolutionary astrology, the Virgo Pisces 6/12 polarity will relate specifically to the sadomasochistic distortions of human-made religions. Follow that? Virgo Pisces 612 relates specifically to the sadomasochistic distortions of human-made religions. All right. Guilt with atonement is I must suffer. Guilt with anger is I will hurt you first. All right. Guilt comes from perfect God, imperfect humans. Well, if someone perfect, if God's perfect, why did it make this mess? So that Saturn right there can tell us that it's possible, and you can extrapolate this to the mutable quadrant, immutable signs, mutable houses, Gemini, Virgo, Sag, Pisces, 3rd, 6th, 9th, 12th. That mutable quadrant can start to say or tell us that there's been past lives of religious conditioning. What has been your religious imprinting in this life? Any?
I started in like a Christian church and then I kind of exited out of it. But I still have religion to an extent, but it's like my own version of it, I guess.
All right. Are you hearing this okay in the room with that? Okay. So there's been some. What we are finding as time goes by, and I think this is really true for Neptune's transit through Pisces, is there's been a shedding of so much of this religious conditioning going on. It was different when I was growing up in the 60s. Okay. These younger people don't have quite as much religious conditioning factors. They can be there from past lives, and that's what we're seeing in this chart. She has the Mars in Virgo. The Mars is last quarter square to Pluto in Virgo. And so if we start to extrapolate this T-square and where the soul is coming from, there are unconscious past life influences of religious conditioning, okay, or very strong social conditioning that says, do this, don't do that, and if you violate, you will be punished. All right. And so, we can have a soul that part of that deepness that she feels, it's possible that it is her own wounding from being hurt, from being persecuted. Saturn in the 6th house, Mars in the 12th, those archetypes. That adds on to this picture of what 29-degree Scorpio is trying to shed. Wait a minute. Who says that's right or wrong? I think for myself, 3rd house Pluto. Agree? She agrees. Following with this?
And I agree with what you're saying. I always feel insecure about my own beliefs because it's not what everyone around me necessarily believes. So I definitely feel that.
Insecure around her own beliefs. Jupiter is new phase Pluto. It's brand new belief systems this lifetime. Yahoo! But yes. And so that goes back and forth in that T-square, okay, of first quarter phase Saturn. I've got to find my own beliefs on a deep level. And last quarter square Mars to Pluto. Here's another caveat with evolutionary astrology. When we work with that cycle of phases and aspects, we get asked the question, well, how many lifetimes has the soul been born with Pluto in the 3rd house? We go and start with Pluto and we go count the 8 phases, the 360 circles divided by 45 in 8 phases. Oh, I think I wandered back, answering a question I wandered with earlier. Early on in evolutionary astrology, that cycle of phases and aspects became one of my personal loves. I love to teach on that subject. And so I do have some in-depth workshop on the cycle of phases and aspects on our website if you're interested. Okay, so we start with Pluto and we count phases. And if you look at Pluto, Mars, to do it fast, it's just past that last quarter square. Okay, if Mars was 29 degrees Leo, it'd be exact last quarter square. It's moved into last quarter phase. Okay, so we have new crescent, first quarter, gibbous, full, disseminating last quarter. I counted 7. She's had at least 6 prior lifetimes with Pluto in the 3rd house, because that Mars Pluto phase will go through each of the 8 phases together in a specific house. Oh, did that just get complicated? Look at it this way. I don't have any proof, but I doubt we do it linearly. because we're multifaceted. But so Mars last quarter Pluto, she's entering into that. And so we're only going to get through this Pluto stuff. Okay. But all right. She, you know, she's been around the block a few times with Pluto in the 3rd house. And it adds to the picture last quarter. Okay. Last quarter is a crises in consciousness phase. And so Mars is going, what's this all mean? I've got to have actions. My soul has to do something that's meaningful to me. I can't do the stuff. I can't just be Virgo busybody anymore. 3rd house Pluto to Mars in Virgo. The last quarter phase of Mars to Pluto says, I've got to have deep meaning with the things that I do in my life. Agree? Right. Okay, we can add on other planets. We haven't even got to that South Node in Taurus, briefly, because I only have 10 minutes left. Are you okay? I'm just going to speed up and go fast, but you get the starting to get the picture of what we're talking about here. Yeah. The South Node is in Taurus and it's in the 8th house. That South Node in Taurus tells us that this soul has had prior lifetimes on a conscious emotional level in which she's recognized it's up to me, Taurus. I've got to be able to do it. I've got to be able to take care of myself. I've got to be able to provide for myself. All right. She left home early. She probably went to work early, correct? Yeah. And so you add it on to the 8th house. Oh, but the little merging comes through. Can I actually do it myself? Or do I need to do it with someone else? You know, that South Node Taurus Scorpio adding on the sexuality element could mean that she probably had some of those intense Scorpio relationships pretty early on. And, you know, that Scorpio love at first sight intensity, I'm just going to jump right in. And then that South Node in Taurus felt stuck and went, what am I doing here? I want my freedom. Did you leave the relationships or did they leave you? She left the relationships, 3rd house Pluto. And so there's a mixture with that South Node in Taurus, you know, of self-reliance, codependency. I'm using words broadly, okay? All right, goes back and forth. All right. Now, Pluto polarity point is the 9th house, and its ruler, all right, is Taurus. Generational lessons of self-reliance. We won't do a lot of details on that. I must rely on myself to meet all my needs, physical, emotional, mental, spiritual. Polarity point by her individual soul is 9th house. It's Sagittarius. That 3rd house energy that is here and there and everywhere has got to focus. It's got to prioritize what is of most meaning in my life to guide me in going forward. How do I trust my own inner voice? How do I trust my intuition? What do I believe? What makes sense for me in my world, not what everybody else wants. Now, the ruler of that Pluto polarity point by house, 9th house, ruler Sag or ruler Jupiter, back to new phase Pluto. This is a lifetime that as she sheds codependency, she just busts out, breaks free, finds her own guidance in life. Agree? Yeah. Question?
It was more of an observation. I'm wondering like how you consider the moon with this, because I noticed that she has the moon trining Pluto and it's in a waning gibbous phase. So it's almost like assisting her in letting go of some of those things.
Yep, good observation. Very good observation. Sometimes I go and I just nail on a archetype when I teach beginning astrology. Okay, so we're not having a lot of time to do a whole chart and start with a chart and skip, you know, anyway. Good observation. Hold on. I got to repeat it for Zoom. The moon is in a, let's see what it is. It's a disseminating trine to Pluto. It's the waning trine to Pluto. Waning trines are outer rewards if you've made prior effort. Okay. Outer rewards if you've made prior effort, waning trines. So you see how this can feed into her on an emotional level of her soul, that moon to Pluto. Sorry. Of really, there's an emotional maturity that can come through for this soul. And and it could also be that she grew up fast, but she got it fast. You know, she maybe want to play all of the silly emotional dating games that everybody else played, correct? Yes, good observation from the back. One question right there, 5 minutes. Okay, everybody.
Okay, so if her south node is in Taurus, wouldn't that mean she's already pretty comfortable in the Taurian realm because the south node is what we're bringing in as our state?
Correct. That south node in Taurus at 20, wait a minute. Okay, yep, south node in Taurus will be helpful for her moving towards the Pluto polarity point, evolving her soul, because her ego has had to rely on herself in the past. You know, she gets caught up, south node 8, gets caught up in codependency. No, I got to do it myself, Taurus, that back and forth. But yes, that south node in Taurus means that she will be able to evolve towards her Pluto polarity point a little better, a little faster. Now, let's just bring in 5 minutes, that north node. So she's trying to really go towards opening up her intuition and her belief systems and find her own philosophy in life for her soul to calm down all that third house energy. And one of the ways that she's going to facilitate that is through that north node, which is a new phase conjunction to Venus in Scorpio in the second house. Whew, let's unwrap that. The ruler of the south node by sign is conjunct the north node. Remember when we said a planet conjunct the north node? They're really trying to evolve that forward. They can make some evolutionary leaps when a ruler of the south node is conjunct the north node by sign or house. It means, oh, I'm getting this. I can really do this. And so this Venus in Scorpio is not afraid to do her confrontations. Scorpio, confrontation, Scorpio word. She's not afraid to do her confrontations with others, Scorpio, and with herself. She will do her own inner second house. Venus rules the second house too. She will do her own inner confrontations when she needs to. And how it will probably work for her is because she's a third house Pluto and that Jupiter's new phase Pluto. Backing up just in life in general, things start to get stirred up. That emotional energy builds, that mental energy builds in her. And sooner or later, there's got to be some type of cataclysm, small or little. And she has light bulbs go off, third house Pluto. She gets that ninth house aha. And then that north node goes, and we're going to do it. Does that happen? Oh gosh. Okay. So I knew there was no way we get through a whole chart. We got just a few more minutes. What do you see in the chart that you want me to bounce off you?
Venus conjunct the north node.
Venus conjunct that north node. Again, she's confronting anything of codependency that does not let her be self-reliant. And that even adds, even that north node signature adds to that 29 degrees Pluto going, I am shedding lifetimes of codependency, not just to people, but to resources as well. I can create my own resources. Individuating Taurus, I am my resource. Spirituated Taurus, the ultimate resource. Thank you.
Anything about Mars square Pluto? Any Mars square Jupiter?
Mars is a disseminating square to Jupiter. So Mars is going to add to the frustration and doubt and busybodiedness of Jupiter going, can I do this? Okay. But because it's disseminating phase, if she will step back and just allow the intuition to work, Pluto, Jupiter new phase, Pluto, ninth house polarity point, if she'll step back when Mars gets stirred up, then disseminating phase, they can talk to each other and figure out a broader answer that then allows the Virgo detail to calm down.
How about Mars, Mercury?
Mars, Mercury. Oh, nice. She's a teacher, right? Didn't she say she's a teacher? Boy, yeah, She's a good worker. She's a good teacher. Here's waxing trines, okay? Waxing trines are inner reward with prior effort. Sometimes EA will call trines couch potatoes. It's so nice. I don't have to make the effort. So I always look at how that's observed, how that's actually manifesting. Have they made prior efforts? And I would say that chances are, being a third house Pluto, okay, that Mercury trine to Mars, she's made the prior efforts of doing all the work, everything she has to do. She quit school early, but she went back to school. I'm going to say that work and study comes easy to her. Even probably perhaps communications, a good teacher. They're telling me my voice is done. Thank you.